Hey, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Let's start with this. Bradford, 3 games, 2 of them with Kelly, yesterday with Shermer. What we see from Bradford over the last 3 games to suggest, if you believe he should be the quarterback in Philadelphia next year, what did you see over the 3 games that kind of changed for him, that he had a string of 3 pretty good games?
It's what we saw in the preseason. We kept saying that, if you give him good protection and he has a good set of receivers around him, that when he's healthy and he's in a groove, he can be as good a quarterback, maybe not as good a quarterback as anybody in the league, but pretty darn close. You can see a top 10 to your quarterback, and that's, people keep talking about wanting to change the quarterback, and I'm looking at the 2015 season going, I know he didn't stay healthy the entire season, and you do need a better backup than what the Eagles had, but Sam Bradford's not the reason for this team's woes this year, because for the most part he's had a very good season, and he can get even better if you give him a better set of receivers, or if you get him more in sync with the receivers that he's got.
Casey, yesterday, what did you see different from Bradford with Shermer? It looked like the offense yesterday had much more rhythm, less clunkiness. I mean, it seemed that there was something different yesterday between Bradford and the Shermer calling plays than when Kelly was calling plays.
Yeah, I think that when you got Kelly, you're going to according to a certain system. I think with Shermer had coached. He had coached with Bradford before at the Rams and things. So I think he knew what Bradford can do, and I think he probably tailored a game plan that was more. Rather than Chip Kelly's game plan is a Chip Kelly game plan. I think Shermer said, "Let's make a Sam Bradford game plan. Let's do as much of that as we can, given the structure of the system. Let's put a game plan together that it's the best out of his talents and things." We're getting some vertical passing. We're getting a lot of things. I think Bradford would be very comfortable with. I think probably Shermer was probably more willing to make those changes than Kelly was.
Well, all right, so yesterday Bradford, very effective, 65% completion for the season, franchise record. Yesterday I think he was 30 of 38, over 300 yards for the 3rd straight game there. If you are the Eagles, do you take into account what you saw there when you are interviewing Shermer for the head coaching position?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If I'm looking at it and saying, if I know what Shermer can do with him and what he did with him previously, too. Again, they had some good numbers together when you consider all the factors, good numbers together when they were working together with the Rams and things. Yeah, I'm definitely looking at that, because if I'm the Eagles, I know that you've got to have an upper-tier offense to compete in the NFL. You've got to have an offense that can go toe-to-toe. And there were times this year, even with Kelly's reputation as an offensive coach, that wasn't happening. And I'm looking at what I see with Shermer and Bradford and saying, this is be a building block for the future. And if you're Shermer, that's one of the things you go with and say, hey, look what I do with Bradford this week. We could do that over the course of an entire season. Doesn't solve the defensive problems, but at least you think you can have a top 10 offense.
Hey, are you a proponent though of Sam Bradford being the quarterback and another head coach, meaning, he had Shermer in St. Louis as coordinator. I think McDaniels was in there. Was Shanahan there for a couple of years? Then he comes here for Kelly. Then he has, would he have to be going on to another guy? Would you be a proponent of Bradford if it's a different head coach than Pat Shermer?
I still would be. The thing is it's what type of coach you're getting. And you do want to you want the coach to be sold on the quarterback. But at the same time, if you're the Eagles, you got to look at it from a personnel perspective and say, okay, well, if you're hiring a new head coach, you can say, this is your quarterback. This guy is talented enough to win. And I would think the Eagles would be able to say to somebody, not that, look, you couldn't bench Bradford, but to say, if you wanted to or change to a different quarterback down the road, but say you need to give Bradford a shot at running whatever system that you've got, because we paid a pretty good price for this guy, and frankly, what we've seen out of him when he stays healthy and things, both from what he did in St. Louis and what he's been doing for Philadelphia, he can be an upper-tier quarterback. So I then put it this way. If I'm the Eagles and I've got a coach who comes in and says, I don't think I can win with Sam Bradford, I'm wondering why I'm hiring that coach.
KC Joyner is with us, ESPN.com NFL Insider. We know that the Murray thing did not fit all year long. That was just square peg, round hole. Can it fit? Can Murray still play in a more conventional system? In other words, is this an attractive duo, Bradford and Murray, if you're a head coach, Adam Gase, somebody that's an offensive mind looking at the Philadelphia Eagles?
My concern about Murray is when he was in college, he played really well, and you'd think, okay, well, he's trying to impress NFL scouts to get an NFL contract. And when he was at Dallas, he had injury issues, and it was durability, until finally he's in a contract year, and wow, this guy can carry the ball 35 times a game if you need him to. And then suddenly he gets the contract, and now he's not the same back. So I'm a little bit worried about him. Is he a contract year player? And if when he plays up to his talent level, yeah, he's a great player. But I'm a bit concerned that was part of the problem this year. Part of it was the Eagles Chip Kelly didn't use him properly, and it was like you said, square peg round hole. But I'm still curious about if this is the kind of back who's unless you've got a motivation for him to go out and get a new contract, if he's going to be a guy who's going to put up big numbers. So that's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, he yesterday had that big run for 54 yards, and then somehow at halftime he had less than 54 yards. It seemed like it was that type of season for him. We know moving in the coming weeks here, moving forward, Casey, we'll talk a lot more about some offseason fits and stuff, but I do want to ask about the wide receiver position in Philadelphia. They drafted Matthews in the first round, Huff in the third round, and Aguilar in the first round, Matthews in the second round, and Huff in the third round. They've invested a lot in wide receivers. Is that a position they still need to add to? I'm
wondering if it might be an issue where up until last year, up until the last couple of years, it used to be that you'd think a receiver has to be in a system with a team a couple, 3 years before they really hit their stride. That they can't come in. They're not like running backs where they can come in and make an immediate impact. That you've got to give them time to get acclimated. And we've seen so many receivers come into the league now who have had really good early success. I mean, dominant early success. Odell Beckham comes in. Wow, look what he does, and Landry and a bunch of other ones. And you say, wow, these guys are just great out of the gate. So maybe that's what we expect now. Maybe what you have with their talent is, hey, these aren't those talents who can come in immediately in year one and succeed. But if you give them a couple, 3 years in the system, they can succeed that way. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm looking at that situation going, I don't give up on these guys yet because I have a feeling that might be the issue is that, these are just guys who just are going to take a couple years to acclimate. So I would just I would see if this pays off more just, rather than basing out this year. I think that, let this play out and I have a feeling that we'll be talking a lot better about the receivers in a couple years.
We'll dive into the playoffs with Casey on Thursday's show. A couple quick NFL hits here. Is there a candidate you like?
I'd love to see David Shaw from Stanford come to the NFL, and that's. I don't think he's going to do that. He'd be a guy who I think would be fit for any team, including the Eagles. He'd be somebody I'd be looking at. Gase would be a great fit. You never know if a guy's going to make a transition from a coordinator to being a head coach, but Gase seems to have. He's done very well everywhere he's went, and he'd be a guy I'd be looking at. So. It's a tough call, but I definitely want somebody who I think is going to be. You don't want to just look for play calling skills. You want to look for. It's kind of like the Steelers and Tomlin. When you look at Tomlin's record before he became head coach, he wasn't a great coordinator and he was a position coach and things, but he had all the material they needed to be a head coach. He was going to be the CEO of the team. If I'm the Eagles, I'm looking at that. I don't want necessarily guys who can come in here with some offensive system or some defensive system. I want a guy who can be in the role of head coach and coach the entire team. And I just wonder if Adam Gase is going to have that. It's one of those things where you got to see what plays out in the interview.
Quick thoughts on Coughlin getting let go. Probably not a surprise, but was now the time?
Seems like it might just be a time for coaches to have about a 10-year window with their teams. And never mind a Coughlin 69. He's been there a little more than 10 years, and teams usually. That's an old saying from Al Davis that coaches have 10-year windows. So I think his 10-year window is up.
All right, 2 Super Bowls. Coughlin's done in New York. We know Philadelphia's looking for a coach. Will Sam Bradford be back? It's going to be a weird situation because the quarterback is a free agent in Philadelphia, and he did say yesterday, pretty ringing endorsement for Pat Shurmur, who was interviewing maybe as we speak. Casey will be back on Thursday, and we'll preview some very interesting NFL playoff games. Happy New Year, pal.
Same to you, man.